Good morning, everybody. John Stettin, Past the Wire, from the War Room, Office, Studio, all in one, whatever you want to call it. We do it all here, bringing you up to date on the Sport of Kings, everything that's going on in the game worth talking about, a couple of things that may not be worth talking about, we may talk about anyway, but here we are, getting everybody caught up, and we'll start with what else? The Belmont Stakes, because we've got a horse going for the Triple Crown. Whenever that happens, it's one of the most exciting times in the Sport of Kings. So we might as well start there and with the developments surrounding the Belmont Stakes and what's going on with that. To what should have been and should be nobody's surprise, it was announced this week that Audible is not running in the Belmont. Well, we, on a previous broadcast, discussed common ownership and, trainers having multiple horses in the same race that aren't coupled, and, went into the, the conflicts there and how it, most importantly, takes away from the sportsmanship aspect of the game and the competitive aspect of the game. And, if Audible was owned by people other than Windstar Farm and the China Horse Club, who own Justify, going for the Triple Crown, he'd probably be in the race. He's not running, and, while it's not the, quote, sportsman thing to do, it's also something that you can't blame them for, because if you had a horse going for the Triple Crown, would you want another one of your horses to beat him and take away his chance at immortality and a spot in the history of this great game that is quite enviable, to say the least? You probably wouldn't. I probably wouldn't. So that being the case, you can't really blame them. But at the same time, where's the happy medium? Because it takes away from the sportsmanship. I personally don't think Audible was a serious contender to win the Belmont Stakes. But by that same token, I think he deserved a shot off his third place finish if he's training well and if he's doing well to have a shot to run in it. And we all know horses can humble you, so maybe he could win it despite what I think about him. We'll never find out, because he's staying in the barn. And that's just one of the things that the common ownership and, all these people buying into the same horses and, being partners and spreading the risk and sharing the wealth, takes away from the game. But, I can't sit here and tell you I've got the answer to that, because everybody should be able to buy into whatever horses they want. It's all free enterprise. I mean, only a couple of trainers are getting the slew of the best horses. We know that. It's a problem in the game, but yet, if you're an owner, and the owners and the bettors, like I've said many times, are the only ones putting money into the game as opposed to taking it out. If you're an owner, or I'm an owner and I've been one, you want to be able to give your horse to whoever you want. So, how do we balance that out? I don't know. But I think we do need to figure out a way to create a little bit more parity in that regard, because again, like I said in the other broadcast, we're going to drown out the small bonds and eventually drown out the little bit bigger bonds and eventually drown out the whole game. In other Belmont news, with Audible out, we've got Noble Indian, and people are saying, well, Noble Indy is a great rabbit for Todd Pletcher's other horse who's in there, and that's Vino Rosso. And I think that may or may not be the case, and I'll explain why. We're not going to handicap the Belmont now. That's a whole nother broadcast that'll be devoted strictly to that. So you want to catch it, subscribe to the Past the Wire channel, or just follow us and check back. Check on my website, pastthewire.com. And don't miss that, because we'll go into good detail with it. And the Belmont has been one of my favorite races for a very good reason for a long time. And we'll talk a little bit about that when we do that broadcast. But to stay on point and get back to, Noble Indy and his, quote, rabbit status, I think that is going to depend a lot upon how he's ridden. And I will explain. Technically, or, the common opinion is a rabbit goes to the lead, goes fast, assures a quick pace, and sets it up for the closer, and weakens the other speed. And I think if Noble Indy goes out for the lead and, tries to get Justify to chase him and go fast, I think Mike Smith is way too smart for that, and it's not going to happen. I think that would be a mistake. I think that the way Noble Indy can hurt Justify, if that's his game, if he's in the race to hurt Justify and try and set it up for Vino Rosso, who many people think is a true mile-and-a-half horse, if that's his intent, the way to do it is not going to the lead, because Mike will sit off him with Justify, take him whenever he wants, and probably have enough left in the tank to have plenty of fight for whoever's coming late. So, how are you going to weaken him? I would, if I was on Noble Indy and that was my goal, which, again, we want to see people riding to win, not riding to hurt a Triple Crown winner, but let's look at the, the cards that are on the table. If that's what Noble Indy's intent is, to, help give Vino Rosso a better shot, and I don't know that it is or it isn't. If that is his intent, the best way to do that would be let Justify go, and once he gets out there, go after him, hit him early, hit him mid-race, hit him a little bit later, make him do some work, make him have to run, make him have to get competitive. A couple of times earlier in the race, as opposed to allowing him to relax off you, let you go and then inhale you. Because if he's got to get competitive and, get hit a little bit early in the race on the lead, it's going to be a lot tougher for him than if he's able to waltz around there by himself, or if he's able to, sit off you and just, kind of inhale you when Mike tells him to. So, that being the case, whoever winds up on him, that's probably the best way to ride him if your intent is to hurt Justify. If you're in there to try and win the race, then, that's a whole nother story. But I don't know that anybody sees Noble Indy as a true winning contender in the Belmont Stakes. Like I said, I'm not going to handicap it now, but just going off what I know and what I think, I really don't think he's a Belmont winner. Speed's always dangerous, but I just don't see him as a Belmont winner. But I reserve the right to pick after I actually handicap the race. That said, Gronkowski is coming in for the Belmont. He's now in the barn of Chad Brown. No surprise there. We got that handful of guys that get all the big name horses, all the top all the sale toppers. Chad is right at the top of that list. So no surprise he got Gronkowski for the Belmont. He'll attract a little attention because of that. How much of a player he is, remains to be seen. But that's really all the interesting Belmont news. No Axeman off that monster Sir Barton win, which again we talked about in the previous broadcast. He might be the horse that could really be a threat to Justify and certainly hurt him on the front end. And he's a horse that looks like if you let him go and ramble, it'd be a lot more dangerous than Noble Indy going out there and rambling. I think that Justify would have to go after him, and he might not give it up as easily as Noble Indy might, even though Noble Indy did show some fight in Louisiana earlier in the year. This is a whole nother ball game. But, he's not running again because, he's trained by Bob Baffert. And but I don't think Bob's going to put anybody in there that he really thinks is going to be able to beat Justify, although he's got Restoring Hope in there. I don't think he really thinks he's all that much of a threat. Just my opinion. Don't know that for sure, but that would be my guess. In other news, also in interesting news, Javier Castellano, top rider for many years, leading money winner a lot of times, Eclipse Award winner, a lot of people's favorite rider, go-to guy. His business has slowed down a little bit, and we could probably trace that back to a couple of years ago. Javi split from Matt Musica. Matt is really, really good agent. Javier had most of his success with Matt. And he switched and went to Mike Lakehow, who had never been an agent before, but, worked in a racing office at NYRA and out in California. And, knew everybody and, seemed to make the transition good. But Javier's business did slip a little bit. And I don't know how much of a blame you could really put on Mike Lakehow for that, because look what was happening around. Javier was getting a little older. The Ortiz brothers are just, climbing in success and recognition and getting into, all the top bonds. That's pulling business from Javier. Luis Saez is getting into some of these bonds. That's pulling business from Javier. A couple of other guys as well. That on top of the new agent, on top of Javier getting a little older and maybe making some wrong calls on some horses, could, all be contributory, and probably all is contributory to some level. So again, Javier decides to make a change now, and he goes to John Panagot. Interesting choice. John has never been an agent as well. So he's gone from Mike Lakehow, who was never an agent, to John Panagot, who's never been an agent. But interestingly, and this gets back into that whole perceived conflict and transparency thing that's, just probably not the best way that the game should be run. John is the racing manager for Bob LaPenta. Robert LaPenta's had a lot of really good horses, been in the game a long time, major player, a lot of partners on a lot of horses too, like some of these other people. Had a lot of horses with Nick Zito not too long ago. Now he's got the bulk of his horses with Chad Brown. So does the move A signify that Javier is looking to get more of a solid foot back into Chad's barn like he had in the past? Probably so. Is John the guy to do it? Well, we know he's bringing LaPenta's horses there, and he's involved dealing with Chad on a close level probably. Maybe he can. Logical, easy connected dots over there. It's not rocket science. But it's interesting that Javier would go from, one guy who's never been an agent to another guy who's never been an agent. Now, the other issue is John is going to be allowed to continue to serve as the stable agent for Bob LaPenta while he's jockey agent for Javier and has Javier's book. Is that a conflict of interest? I don't know. But it looks like it could be. And that's probably not the best thing for the game when we're looking to be more transparent and really run the game and police the game in a manner that encourages the belief that everything is on the up and up and there's a lot of disclosure. Most of the transactions and deals are arm's length and nothing short of that. Doesn't mean that they're not in this case, and it doesn't mean that John can't, walk that tightrope, balance it, and, have no conflict at all. And where the conflict's going to come in, I'm not really sure, other than him maybe, knowing one horse is better than another and having an insight into the Chad Brown bond that somebody else may not have. But when you think about it, that's really the job of an agent anyway, and how they get that edge, and how they get that knowledge. Sometimes it's relationships, friendships, this, that, it's not always just their own astute studying, handicapping, and, knowing the game, because like the rest of us, they'll be wrong more than right. And that's just the nature of our game. So, I just don't know that, the racing manager for a prominent stable and a prominent barn and owner should be able to work as a jockey agent on that same circuit at that same time. I'd have to know a lot more and have to really, dissect that to be totally comfortable with it. At this point, I'd say it falls in the gray area. The other thing I would say is the rumor that came out or was leaked and then was quickly squashed about this stallion deal being done with Justify, probably a deal. Stuff like that doesn't get leaked unless there's, some fire. You know, where there's smoke, there's fire, and there was definitely smoke. So, you know, I guess we'll find out after the Belmont, because if Coolmore's got him, the deal was probably done. If it's 60 million, like they said, then the deal was no question done when they, you know, when it leaked out or when it came out. But even if that number changes, doesn't mean that the deal wasn't done, because there could be a kicker involved if he wins the Belmont. There could be a reduction involved if he doesn't win the Belmont. But I think they all, you know, all the players played it smart and cool, no pun intended for Coolmore, in doing a deal prior to the Belmont, if that's what they did. So, you know, my gut tells me the deal's done. It remains to be seen. We'll probably know afterwards. Like I said, you'll be able to tell by the structure and what comes out. But you know, as a gambling man by nature, if I had a bet, I would bet the deal's done. A lot of good racing coming up. The last issue we'll talk about before we move on and get to studying the Saturday card after we got some changes and some updates, is the complaints on social media regarding the weak cards that we're seeing, especially on the NYRA circuit and some other circuits as well, California, to name another, leading up to the Belmont Stakes. Well, we know California's been having some issues with short fields for a while, as are a lot of tracks. NYRA now, we're seeing you know, the problem with the races because of Belmont Stakes Day. They're going to card you know, a lot of the good races for that day and that, you know, couple of days surrounding it. And when you do that, the cards prior suffer. There's just no way around that, and lack the quality and lack the size. And you factor that in, you know, with horse shortages, excuse me, and people waiting longer to run their horses back, which they do today, and you have that problem. You have the you know, the smaller fields and the weaker cards, and it's just inherent to the new big day, all-out Saturday philosophy that the game has embraced. We have more of those big days, and we have more cards that suffer because of them. And the suffering isn't only limited to the cards right before it, it's limited to the cards after it. And we'll see that after the Belmont Stakes. And, you know, then we'll have two reasons. We'll have one, that, you know, they just ran all those big races and all those good horses over the Belmont weekend and over the, you know, the Belmont Stakes Festival. And then you'll have Saratoga right around the corner, and a lot of races will be held to the condition book for Saratoga, and a lot of horses will be held out for Saratoga. So, you know, while those big days are great on the big days, they do impact the other cards and the rest of the year. So that's just something we got to deal with and adapt to. There's really no way around it. That's the, you know, that's the way they do it right now, and that's you know, how we're going to have to play the hand that we're dealt. So again, thanks for stopping by, everybody. John Stettin, Past the Wire. You only get my opinion and my thoughts right here. I hope you like them. Feel free to weigh in and give everybody a heads up on something else. A gentleman by the name of Kevin West, one of the tracking trip members, and someone I consider a friend, nice guy, knowledgeable guy when it comes to racing, brought up an interesting question, and it's how do I deal with prep races and betting on horses that you know are in a race as a prep for another race, and that leads into a whole nother question of trainers giving a horse a race or knowing a horse needs a race and maybe not being in there per se to, quote, win, but to kind of get a horse fit or give a horse a race or, you know, prep a horse for a bigger goal down the road. That's something that we face as bettors. I have a way as a handicapper and a bettor that I deal with it, and we're going to discuss that in an upcoming broadcast and go into detail on that. And for those of you out there that like to bet and like to wager, that's something that you might find interesting that's going to be coming up pretty soon. So look out for that as well. And thanks again, everybody, for stopping by. John Stettin, Past the Wire. Always good to see you. And we'll be back with more. Ciao for now.